Alrighty, guys, welcome to my TED Talk. Just kidding. This is my advocacy project, so I wanted to share that with you. Um, just want to make sure it is recording, and it is. So, here is my advocacy project. I'm going to start my timer, and then we can get going. So, I did this advocacy with Cassie, and we went to do two different locations and did a psychoeducation group. So, here's a little picture of one of the places. We went to a church in Mount Horeb, and so this was on the sign or on the door of our little sign. So, I'm just going to give you a rundown of why we did this. So, the population we initially wanted to do K through 12, but since talking to like the middle and high school counselors, we determined that there's the most need in this population of high school because there's so much stigma and the mental health, like appearance of anxiety and depression, are in this time frame. So we wanted to help students just understand the signs and symptoms of anxiety and depression, since those are the most common. Um, or one of the most commons. And since they're in that developmental age where they're kind of impressionable, but also to the point where they can think concretely, we thought it'd be really good to create positive schemas, right? So we talked about, like I said, the issues of anxiety, depression, and then we talked a little bit about self-care as well, just like a preventative thing. So our goals for this advocacy was to increase awareness for the signs and symptoms of anxiety, depression, learn additional coping strategies and self-care techniques, and I'll show you a little bit about those in the slides below, and to decrease the stigma around mental health. So, like I said, we did two different locations. So the first one you can see here, Cassie and I in front of the door, and then we took a little picture in the background of us with the church in the background, as you can see. And then here's me in the middle, just presenting with our little presentation. And this one was really fun. So it was at a high school youth group. It's in a church, and there was 8 high school girls. And so they were referred to the church in this little area because they had some self-esteem issues and just some overall anxiety. And it was really cool because they were very engaged, very motivated. It was kind of like a group counseling session because it was so small. And then the next group that we did was 4 different groups inside this middle and high school at Rio Grande High School. Kelly Stein is actually the school counselor there this year, and so she kind of hooked us up in that, which was really nice. So we presented to 4 different groups, 12th, 8th, 7th, and 6th graders, and we all presented the same presentation. And I'll get into a little more about what the presentation entails here. But so those are the 5 groups that we did. And then after our presentation, we had this little brochure pamphlet. So for the school at Rio Grande, we put it in their newsletter, and then for the church, we put it in this brochure. So we had a physical copy, as you can see. The brochure just has a little bit of information about what we talked about, what we went over, sorry, and just some signs and symptoms of anxiety and depression, and a little bit of self-care activities. And what's also interesting, as I'll show you later in the presentation, is that we did include resources to where the kiddos could go and look if they needed additional mental health support. And so we tailored that to each location that we went to. So in Mount Horeb, we found places, counseling spaces around Mount Horeb, and then in Rio, we found places that the kids could go to as well. So the next slides I have here are just a little bit of what our presentation looked like. So here's the first of the slide about what mental health is. I thought it was funny, so I included the little brains thing here. And so this was one of the first slides that we did in the presentation, and just went over what is mental health, and I included some science in there too. And it got a lot of the kids talking and asking questions and stuff, just a little background of what mental health was. And then afterwards, we went through, and I didn't show these slides because it was a interactive part where we had signs and symptoms of anxiety, and the kids came up and they wrote what they thought their signs and symptoms of anxiety would include, and then me and Cassie helped them out where there could be more added. And we did the same with depression. So it was really collaborative and really engaging for the kiddos. Um, in that they got to get up and ask questions and base off their knowledge, right? And then improve it from what Cassie and I had said. And so then after that, we talked a little about when it becomes like a clinical necessity. So we talked about the difference between healthy anxiety and healthy sadness, and then what is clinically necessary. So we had a little bit about, when do I need to talk to someone? So I'm not feeling safe, I'm not feeling myself, and I'm confused about the way I feel, or I feel the way I do. And then when I don't think I can talk to someone. So that was our kind of stigma piece, where a lot of these kids, or a lot of our society in general, don't think they can talk about mental health, as we know as counselors. And so helping them realize that it's okay to go to talk to someone, even if you don't have a clinical diagnosis. And it was really cool to see their questions and responses to that, because many of them did think that if you went to counseling, you had something wrong with them. So that was also another piece where I'll get into my reflection about why that was really cool to see. And then, like I said, so our little preventative measure was our little self-care thing. So we listed a bunch of examples of some self-care things that I like to do. And then we went around the room in each group that we did, and we had each person say what's a self-care activity that they do. And they had a bunch of different ones. Like in Rio, they is rural, so they had horses. So like, I ride my horse when I'm feeling stressed, and I was like, me too, I would love that. Um, so I really, really enjoyed that. And going around, it's also another engaging piece that we could see like what they actually took away. Um, so yeah, and so then we concluded basically with a Kahoot, and it was just another little fun thing that they could do. It tested their knowledge, right? And it gave them other ideas. We had a question about decreasing stigma, or do I feel like I can talk about mental health? So it was cool to see the differences in that, and they were really honest, which was awesome, and we could talk about that as it came up. But so, the outcomes of this advocacy project, I feel like there was a lot of positives. I could see the learning happening, and which is really why I like psychoeducation groups, because of the teacher background in me. I could see that they were developing these skills, and then they were engaged, right? And they were actually learning and absorbing the topics. So they did have an increased identification of the signs and symptoms of anxiety and depression. I have some responses. We did a Google Forms at the end for each group, and I have some of those here in a second I can show you. And it did feel like there was an increase of comfortability talking about mental health. There were some kids who didn't want to answer right when I called on them to pick on them, not pick on them, but when I called on them to share, and they didn't want to, but by the end they had they had participated and were engaged, and is also shown through the Google Forms. So and they also learned some self-care activities, and I can show you that too, and identification of situations when help is needed. So here's a screenshot of the survey. Just they listed different coping skills they want to practice. So deep breathing, talking through things, exercise, listening, playing music. And it was really cool to see that laid out. Like they took the time to write all those things out. And so they have it concretely for them. And then this next one is about the stigma. So I feel comfortable talking about mental health issues. Before we did the presentation, it was agree, which was awesome. And then after, it was strongly agree, which even though it was a marginal difference, it was still a difference, right? So I think people, the presentation sent them over that edge, or it sent them, it confirmed that our presentation actually did something. And here's a little bit about our brochure too. So as you can see, the resources over here. This was for Mount Horeb. So we had the Sun Prairie, the Portage, and the Randolph, and then the National Suicide Hotline. So that was tailored to them. And then we had the signs and symptoms of anxiety and depression. And so on the back of this brochure was the self-care tips. And we just outlined that again. So it was really cool for them to be able to take home that brochure, maybe show their parents, definitely in the weekly newsletter that we sent out with Rio Grande. They got to see, like the parents could see um, this newsletter and see all the things that they learned about in this topic. So overall, it was a really, really fun presentation. However, I do wish we had time to do more than just anxiety and depression. So future needs, we definitely discovered through the kids, there was an increased interest in like ADHD, bipolar personality disorders, because ADHD especially, um, because it's it's prevalent in adolescence and childhood. And so we had a lot of questions about that, and we answered it as they came. But it's definitely something that another, psychoeducation group about those would definitely be important. And connecting with school counselors to help relay more mental health information, I think, is definitely something that needs to be done more, definitely in the future. And our brochure, like I said, was an initial step towards future advocacy. So those people um, can read it in the future, the kiddos can observe it, the parents can look at it and take it in. And I also do think that in the future, advocating to different settings. So there's a lot of adolescents who are in sports teams. Sports psychology is a huge thing. So maybe, those kiddos who were like, counseling is stupid and blah 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 in the presentation we did might feel differently if we did it in a different, more comfortable setting, right? If they don't like school but they like sports, it might stick more. So getting in a comfortable space to have that psychoeducation could definitely help. And so just a little bit of personal reflections. I absolutely loved this. I love counseling and I love education, so doing it in a school was just amazing. It like kind of combined everything that I'm interested in and everything that I love to do. So I definitely want to do psychoeducation in the future. And so some of the things I learned though was I'm a very like literal and logical person. So I did use a lot of psychobabble as it was what one of the kids said, and I heard the term before. So tailoring that information to the kiddos and to the audience is definitely something, Oreo, no. It's definitely something I would need to be aware of in the future. So simplifying and tailoring that information with certain phrases or ideas to the clientele to help, is essential to help them like complete their goals and understand the information. And then I learned that it was really hard to connect to these mental health school counselors. Like they have a lot going on. They have so much need, like and time constraints because they're just so busy. And so we contacted many schools, and it was really hard for us to go in. And thankfully Kelly helped us out because she's in this program and she knows how hard it is. So it was difficult to find that just because there's just so much, right? So in the future, when I'm working with these professionals, I need to be aware of the pressure and expectations that they're under. Um, so like I said, overall, it was such a great project. It was very beneficial. Like I learned a lot, and it definitely increased my confidence because I do have, that imposter syndrome where I think I don't know anything. And then this definitely just showed me that I know what I'm doing and that I can present it in an engaging way. So, but yeah, so that is my thing. And thank you for watching my TED Talk. If you have any questions, obviously write me. Stop.